starting point is something that I experienced just going back to a flat yesterday, no, the day before yesterday with him. We were crossing a zebra crossing, and he was a bit back. And we went in front, and the car stopped for us, and then he was following on the zebra crossing, and the car beeped its horn and wanted to drive him over, because he's not a person. And for him, a zebra crossing is not the right of way. It's like putting a bit of furniture onto the zebra crossing. According to civil law, animals are property, even if they're feeling property, but they have no interest themselves. If they are represented, then they are represented only as a cultural value, animal protection as a cultural value, and not as a feeling themselves, as being themselves. This is also what the animal protection law actually does. It is a measure, it's the painless death of animal plays no role in the EU vivisection directive. It says painless death is no suffering. There are 4 stages of suffering: severe, middle, little, and no suffering at all. And this is if you experiment on the animal while it's unconscious. So the killing of the animal, him or herself, doesn't play a role at all. And so the starting point for me is this situation here, a Romanian dog on a chain. Is the problem solved if we just extend the chain so that that dog has freedom of movement and doesn't ever feel being pulled back by the chain? Or is there something, can animals actually prefer being free per se? So just being free and not chained, never mind how long the chain is. And this is sort of what I try to follow in the book, to live with an animal, live with my dog friend. And I truly found out that freedom per se is very important for him. He and I, we do a lot of walking in the wild, about 100 days a year, and that we have been doing for the last 10 years. I actually picked him up from a shelter. He was 8 months old. He had been released on a motorway when he was 3 months old, and he was just tied to a post there. And I took him on, and we sort of, first thing we did was walking 5 days through the woods and seeing how we get along. And it worked so brilliantly that I took him on. And since then, we've been walking a lot. And in the wild, we have this big advantage, in contrast to civilization, that we can live on the same level. It's not me that he has to ask if he wants to go to the toilet. It's not me that he has to ask if he wants to go out briefly. And he doesn't have to be on a lead, like in an underground here. So we can meet on the same level. And he can decide as much as I where we go and what is happening, what we do. And I need him as much as he needs me to survive there. And there's a lot of situations where we sort of communicate on how we go on. Like, it's not me deciding we go this way and then we stop and now we rest. But he's participating in this. And he's the way we decide where we go is very similar. The way he's thinking about it is very similar to me. I don't do that verbally, definitely not. If I'm walking out in the wild, I'm not like a radio commentator constantly telling myself, where do I go next? Why do you want to go there? This is not what's happening. You get the image of the surrounding, the perceptions, the sensual perceptions, and then you just digest it. You wait a bit, and suddenly it forms a decision. And that all happens non-verbally, definitely. And it seems to me it's very similar to him. It's also like when we have a steep slope, and it's not so clear how we go there, then I stand there and not radio commentating, but imagining I would go like this and that, and does it work? Now also I try a bit more left, and when I've settled, then I try that route. And he does the same thing. He stands underneath the slope, and he imagines, obviously, himself going there, and then he climbs it, and he does that very much with reason. He understands where it's dangerous and where not, and he does it in that way. So I have no hesitation to say he is using reason, because this is what you need in order to survive there. You can't just do unreasonable things like climb where it's far too dangerous. And indeed, there is a situation where he suddenly says, no, it's too scary for me, or I don't want to go there, let's go down. Or where he just comes back and says, it's too dangerous further on, you haven't seen it, but I tell you, let's turn around. I have had it also that we went a bit further away from our tent, and it was getting dark and started snowing, and he said, I want to go back now. I said, nah, let's go a bit on. But he very strongly can tell me that. There's a lot of ways of communication. He typically does it if he has a very strong feeling of stopping, and he puts himself just straight in front of me. So you step over him to walk on, and then he goes in front of you again. And when you stop, and then he goes in this direction you want to go, and then he looks so characteristically back, follow me. So this is it's so clear and it's so obvious. Like I always wonder if you are living with a dog, and then you read scientific literature on dog research, and they say, I would love to know what's really happening inside this brain. I mean, we've been living together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days in a year, sleeping in the same bed, doing always the same things together. And I'm so sure I know what's happening inside of him, and I'm sure he knows what's happening inside of me. It wouldn't work otherwise. You can't be out in the wild and you completely misunderstand what the other is doing, because then you constantly say, I mean, how do you arrange yourself? It doesn't work. If there's not one commandeering the other what to do, then you have to be able to understand each other. It's also the social rules we're making together when we do this. For me, it's a social rule: we don't hurt other animals. And when he was very young, he was inclined to hunt. He killed a mouse in front of me. He once ate a little chicklet, so a little chick from a wild bird species. And when we were in Scandinavia, we walked along in the Scandinavian mountains a month alone, we two, in the sort of wildest place of Europe. And there was the lemmings. This was a lemming year, and there was lots of lemmings. And I mean, they were, I don't know if you know lemmings, they're about that size, so, and rodents. And when there's a lemming year, you almost step on them. They're just everywhere. And so he killed a few. And how did I tell him that that's so bad for me? Like you do in a relationship, I just cried, and I was just very stressed, and I said, I can't bear that, I can't bear it, and I don't want to be with you if you do this sort of thing, like you do in a relationship. I expressed these emotions to him, and I also showed him the cold shoulder for 24 hours and said, no, I'm not living with you, it's like that. And after a while, he accepted that, and he said, out of his love for me, and that he doesn't want to challenge or jeopardize our relationship, he just doesn't hunt. And he stopped doing this after he was a bit more than a year of age. He's now 10, and he just doesn't hunt at all. And people who walk with me sometimes in the woods, they're really impressed how he does that. We walk there, and there's a deer, and he goes a bit in this direction, sniffs around a bit. The deer recognizes that he is no threat because he doesn't walk around like this and that. So they even stay, and he doesn't do it. So I've been in this hunting campaign. I've sometimes with sort of friendly hunters talked and walked in their area and tried to do something. And they was always saying, no, you put him on a lead. And I said, no, he doesn't hunt. He doesn't believe me. He's a hunting dog. The hunting breed is in there. This is one of these breeds who are actually the only ones, supposedly, who are capable of hunting by their nose while they gallop. But he doesn't hunt at all. And just out of friendliness. This is his personal decision and his control over himself. It's not fear of me because I never hurt him, and he knows that I would never, like he doesn't hurt me. And so in reality, it is his decision, and this is the social rule we can. But there is also a social rule that I disapprove of that he wants desperately. So one of them is, for some reason, he loves rolling in dead animals. So he doesn't hunt them, but he eats them. He is vegan, actually. He has been vegan all the way. But when we find a carcass in the wild, then he eats them. And obviously he can. It's none of my business. And sometimes we even camp nearby if this is a big carcass, and he goes back there and eats them. So we stay even in the vicinity, and he eats then a lot of that carcass. And sometimes he likes to roll in them. I don't understand that. I asked him, can you stop doing that because it smells so bad? And he said, it's so important to me that we have arranged now, so he can roll in a carcass and I have to shut up about it. This is our arrangement. Some people might say, I've heard that animals, also these dogs, there's just one parameter that defines their psychological well-being, and this is stress. If they're stressed, then it's bad. If they're not stressed, it's good. Out in the wild, obviously, there's often stress, like when we go into the snow. Here is very cold, minus 15 degrees Celsius, walk in the rocks where we're out and camp there. And I was climbing on this ice there, and he had to wait and freeze. So you would say this guy's stressed, and he's obviously animal abuse, this poor creature. Okay, then I tell you one thing. When that walk was finished after a few days, and we came to the car, he just refused going into the car. He doesn't want to go back in the city. I guess this is why he's limping in the city, because he just doesn't like the city. I don't either, but I'm only here for animal rights. If it wasn't for animal rights, it would long be gone with him. But I mean, what happens then is the classic passive resistance. He stands there and said, no, I'm not going in there. He said, okay, Charlie, we need to go back. And then I sit with him and talk a bit and said, can't you, I can't stay anymore. Well, okay, then he sometimes goes in the car, sometimes he refuses. And then he does that, what we do when we do civil disobedience, passive resistance. It's not an aggressive confrontation, it's just you deposit your protest. And this is what he does. He goes limp and lies on the floor. And you have to drag him into the car. He goes completely limp and tries to avoid it, that he actually has to get into the car. But yeah, eventually we arrange ourselves. Sometimes it is true that when they're not so urgent, then I say, okay, let's go out again. So it's not so that I always win these disputes. Here is us in the whiteout. It does happen. We love going out in the snow. He had this short hair at the first year. He was really cold. And I've been living with dogs for 30 years, and they have longer hair. And one of them once fell into a lake that was ice covered, and he broke through, and I just got him out. And it was evening and night in the snow, and I thought, God, he's going to freeze to death. And so I had no tent. We slept in the snow. And he was just beside me, and I constantly woke up and said, is he dying? And he was totally warm, and there was no worries at all. He just rolled up. So if a dog has long enough hair and is toughened from the wild, they have absolutely no problem, even if they're completely wet. But with him, he was freezing in the first year. So I thought, God, this is a dog that can't cope with this cold. But the next year, he grew the hair a lot longer, and he doesn't freeze at all anymore. So this is also that toughens you up. Me as well. Like I go with these sandals because every sock is too hot for me. And people don't understand it. They walk me and say, God, I have all these socks on and it's so hot, so cold. And you know, if you're out in the snow and if you sleep there, you just, I don't know, you develop more brown fat cells that actually constantly keep you warm. So even also as a human coming evolutionary from Africa and the equator region, you can toughen up so much that you can easily sit in the snow. And this is the same true for him. So this is a whiteout, and this is stressful, and we don't know where to go, and it's cold, but we love it. We both do. Here we sleeping out in a tent in the snow, and this is a time that we really enjoy. And I realized there's one single big difference between dogs and humans, and that one big difference is that my evolutionary past is Africa, and his evolutionary path is the northern hemisphere with winters. So he can cope with the winter a lot better than I. We were once in the snow, so deep, new, fresh snow, and I needed a piece from the tent. And you don't want to put on all this stuff, so I go naked. So I go naked in the snow and have a piece. And you know, it takes a few minutes, and you're freezing to death because these the skin of me, you know, always keeps up 37 degrees. So they melt the snow around you, and this draws out the warmth, and then the melted snow freezes on you. Mm-hmm. So I'm not equipped for going naked through snow. While he's standing in the snow, he has a blood circular system that actually that cools in the legs, and then there's a warmth exchange with the blood that is going down. So he can cope with 10-degree cold feet, while my body's permanently heating up at the tip of the toe to 37 degrees. So I'm not equipped standing naked in the snow. But this is the only big difference between us, to my understanding. Yes, there's also play, which proves to me that he is also interested in making up rules. Play doesn't consist, like I've seen so videos how you play with dogs, and they say, yeah, you learn him, if you snip once, they do that, and you snip twice, and they do that, and they walk somewhere, and so on. And then you look at the dog, and the dog is just trying to follow commands. There's not joy. Fun game involves the freedom of doing what you like and bringing yourself in. A game must be that there are two equals deciding together what it is and what they're doing, or play fighting, or whatever else rules we have. But there's one game we really love because he's so good with his nose, is that the sniffing game. Like he stops there and I run off, and I have 5 minutes advance, and then he just starts chasing me, and he always catches me very quickly, but sometimes I do it very difficult for him. I walk somewhere, then retract my steps, jump into a river, walk in the river, and I was sitting up there in the woods and observing him, you know, and he's run over my track, and then he's confused, and he's going back and trying to get my track, and runs over my track, and it's so sweet that he then really yowled, and then he goes back again, carefully sniffing. Oh, here someone jumped in the river. Then he goes along the river, up and down, up and down. Suddenly he finds my track. Woof, he's up at my place. So I realized that this is a very conscious thing, this sniffing. It is not something unconscious where you just do what you do. It's a very conscious problem solving. This is why a dog, if he or she sees an animal and they want to chase them, they would always follow the eye. Before they start sniffing, they would look if they see them, because seeing is straightforward, then you follow. But with the nose, you have to work, consciously work, and that's not so easy. But it's another proof of these conscious decisions of dogs and the conscious thinking and working. Yeah, and the traffic. I can't really stress enough how good he is in that, and nobody almost around me believes that, you know. I can walk with him without a lead through densest traffic, one part of the road and then the other. And it's not me saying, walk here, stop now, wait, come on. But he just does it himself. He understands traffic. When there's dangerous traffic, he sticks with me. If there's no dangerous traffic, he crosses whatever he wants. And he's actually off himself often when we are out in the woods. He's sometimes for 4 hours walking around. And in the city, he does that too. When I was on trial in 2009 and 10, some nice woman gave me a shed to stay, so that she said police wouldn't know that I'm there, so I can sleep well, which was true. And he lived with me in that shed, and I had an operation on the knee, so I couldn't walk with him for a few months. And he went out in the garden, and there was holes in the fence, and he just walked off. And he left for hours, walking through the city. And at first, he was pretty young then, it's almost 8 years ago. I was worried that he might be run over, but I couldn't do anything anyway. I then stood at the window and looked when he's coming and where he's coming from. And then I saw him, and I saw how sort of smart he was doing. He's going on the pavement and then crossing over when no car was there, and then coming to the place I was, and then barking in front of the door so that I opened the door, and then like nothing happened. He walked past me going to the place where he's getting the water, as if it's the most normal thing on the world. And indeed it was the most normal thing on the world. He just coped with it, and as far as I'm aware, there's never has been anything dangerous there. So if I now walk with him through the streets in a busy area, then he might walk in front of me. When there's a crossing, he stops, he waits for me, then he walks beside me, or he waits for the traffic light to turn green. He realizes that from the other pedestrians, he waits with them and then walks with them. And I never give him commands. I don't give him commands in the city, I don't give him commands in the wild, because I'm not in the position to tell him what to do. Another of these things that I realized when I'm speaking with people who train dogs, and they say, yeah, can you ask a dog what he wants? No, because either you give him a command or you don't. But here we're going with a bicycle and a buggy, and he can get into the buggy if he wants. And so he runs beside the bicycle, and then here I stop and ask him, do you want to go in the buggy or not? And I don't think he understands words. He doesn't, he hasn't learned words, but he understands the emotions that I propagate with these words very well. He's very, very intelligent, emotionally intelligent. He feels, like probably every social animal, feels like if there is tension in the air, feels like this one doesn't like that one, and there's a relationship problem here. And he realizes those things, or like, we leave now. Before people start moving, he already realizes we're going to leave now, because he feels that in the air. He's just very sensitive towards these emotions. And if you start looking at the dog, not like if he's doing something naughty and you have him follow the command, but look at him with an interest of what he's just now thinking and deciding, then you realize that he might lie around as if he's sleeping, but he's actually very alert and very understanding of what's happening in the atmosphere. And so you can ask him, and he looks at you with a very characteristic face where he's trying to decipher your message. And then he does it or doesn't do it, like stepping into this buggy or he doesn't. So, and you can go on with the bike or not. But for me, that's a crucial thing. If you can't ask your dog what he wants next to do, then I guess there is a relationship problem. There's a dominance hierarchy that might not have to be there. Yes, and in our relationship, I'd say the highest priority for him is that our relationship is good. So he does hold himself back if there is something he would love to do, but he thinks that would jeopardize our relationship. Sometimes he'd surely love to bite me because he's angry, or because I give him a tofu piece and he wants to have it quickly, and he might hurt me, but he's just not doing it and holding himself back in order not to jeopardize the relationship. So this is a brief sort of summary of our lives. This is the first two chapters in the book of all these experiences, and there are lots of them where he actually helped me. Like we met a bear, and he, the little 30-kilo dog, just stood in front of me, prepared to defend myself, stomping and barking, and this 300-kilo big bear just a few meters in front turned away. He sort of also felt in his hierarchy of priorities or values that he would risk his life in order to save me or save our relationship. And it's also the other way around. Once he got in an avalanche and I was just pulling him out and risked to get under this snow myself. And for me, this is totally obvious. And everybody who's living close with a dog would immediately say, sure, I risk my life for my dog friend. This is totally clear. There's no debate about this. And but doesn't that contradict the notion of dogs being property and of them being of less value than humans? You don't perceive it like that at all if you have such a close relationship. Also, there was once the case when a tree full of snow was on top of me, and he immediately came, pulled me out here, and pulled me out underneath the tree. So he realizes when I'm in danger, he realizes when I'm scared, and he wants to help. And also he wants to calm me down when I'm sad. These are sort of things that are totally clear for an emotional relationship. But how can you, if you live with a dog so close, how can you ever not believe that that's the case? I don't understand. It can only be like that you're living with a dog and not at all perceiving him as a being that you sort of seeing as a commodity and as a thing to command around. But if you're living in an equal relationship, then it's totally obvious that these dogs understand you and feel with you and try to help you. So you might say, wow, there's a huge big difference. We have the big brain and dogs haven't got a big brain. This is a brain scan of Cooksey and that's of mine. And you see there's all the same structures, you know, there's brainstem, here the same. There's the small brain, the cerebellum is here the same. There is this area, the cells of the conscious awareness of your emotions, same. And there's this huge end brain all around, which is the same. The structures are completely the same. So why should a dog be so different? The general thing is that, the general narrative or folklore is that here is coming this information from my genes, the genetic drives. And here is coming the conditioning, like the things that are learned unconsciously. And these put in information here to give me a conscious emotion. And this conscious emotion is now reflected with the end brain, and eventually I decide to do something. So with the same structures, it must be the same thing. You know, here's the drive coming for I'm hungry or something. Here's the drive coming for I've learned that if I grab food, then I sort of stop being hungry. And this gives him in here an emotion, a conscious emotion of being hungry. And then he reflects. And this reflection might be, okay, I'm hungry, but if I grab this now out of the hand of my friend, I jeopardize our relationship because I might hurt him, so I don't do it, or I do it carefully, or I ask for it instead of just grabbing it. This is exactly the same thing that's happening. So if the natural science tells us that, how can you sort of so easily dismiss this? There's also this phenomenon of mirror neurons. Yesterday Mark Rowland spoke about it. This is something that has been found, I think, in the 1990s with monkeys, so by chance. But it has been proven to exist in dogs. This is a neuron system in his brain that actually fires whenever he sees an action and not just when he himself acts. Like lifting his right paw and seeing me lifting my right hand makes these mirror neurons for right hand lifting fire equally, like when he acts and when I act. And this is sort of what you call, what is generally perceived as feeling with the other. Like if you see someone having pain, your neurons for pain fire, and so you feel it yourself. This is the basis of empathy. And this is proven, you know, scientifically proven to exist in dogs. And you can see it, for example, yawning. There is the mirror neurons for yawning. And I read in the New Scientist that you can prove that so-and-so young children, human children, have self-awareness because if you yawn, they start yawning. Yawning is contagious. And indeed, it's with him as well. Try yawn in front of him, and after a while he yawns as well, because he has yawning mirror neurons that fire and that trigger in him the feeling for yawning. And so these mirror neurons, there's 1/3 is for actions like lifting hands and stuff, but 2/3 is also for goal. You know, that if he sees you aiming for something, he feels that himself. This is an action for aiming. And that proves to me that this is not, how dogs act is not just a reaction scheme of some like a conditioning where you get a stimulus and a response, a learned response. But as a matter of fact, they interpret their surroundings of subjects with a motivation or with a goal. So their world is like ours, consisting of subjects that are intentionally acting. And this is actually 230 million years old, this mirror neuron system, and it exists at least in mammals and birds. So there is empathy. I read a while ago, no, this was a lecture at the veterinary university. There was a woman professor lecturing on animal ethics, and she said the big difference between humans and animals is that animals can't have empathy. Look at a cat, how they torture these mice. Okay, then say, look at the enclosure hunter, how they torture these animals. Humans haven't got empathy, obviously. No, there is empathy, and there is the capability of empathy, especially with beings that are close to you. And this is very clear to me, like when I hurt myself, he realizes I'm in pain. This is not a stimulus response, this is a clear understanding. There are magnetic resonance scans that have been done somewhere in the US, Alabama or somewhere, by a guy called Burns. He has written on this, and he actually turned through those experiments into an animal rights person. These are scans, magnetic resonance scans of a brain of a dog, his dog friend, that he brought in this lab. he does these scans by, he had conditioned the dog to sit still in this machine that moves around and makes noise. And if the dog is scared there, then it doesn't work, because then you only see fear in the brain. But what he did was he put the dog there until he's so used to it that he's not scared. And then he showed him a thing to smell, like his own smell, or the smell of loved ones, or the smell of alien humans, alien to him, or of dogs he doesn't know. And then he looked at the brain reaction, and he realized this is very similar neuron activity like to humans. They do recognize smells, they do recognize their own smell. Obviously, everybody who lives with a dog knows that. And they have episodic memories, what he said, that they can remember if there was an activity with this smell, then they have this memory firing of this activity. There's also oxytocin, this love hormone. Here's the chemical signature of it. It's also something where you would have thought loving is something only humans can do. Animals, they just, for them you're just a feeding machine, and so they wait until they give you food, and so they pretend to be loving you. As a matter of fact, this hormone exists in almost all animals, and you can measure it, and you can measure that it heightens when you comforting him or he me, like when we're close, when we sleep together in the bed and we cuddle each other, then this oxytocin is rising, and there is different relationships between beings. It could be between dogs and humans. And the secure relationship, this is when the signature of oxytocin is the highest. And that clearly shows that he knows that he can be comforted. Like when he is sad and I cuddle him, oxytocin raises and he feels comforted. And the other way around, he can comfort me. As a matter of fact, for me, oxytocin rises if he is friendly to me and assures me that he's there and that he will help me. And the funny thing was that in these measurements of oxytocin in different animals, they measured the highest level in the relationship of a dog and a goat. They loved each other, and after a cuddling session, they had the highest oxytocin, even higher than humans in a romantic relationship. So they obviously loved each other really. And then self-awareness, you know, another of these decisive criteria. Dogs aren't self-aware. Even Peter Singer, I think, tells us that dogs can't think into the future because they aren't self-aware, so they aren't persons. Okay, living with him, I'm totally convinced. He is a person. Living with him, I'm totally sure that he is self-aware. He definitely is. The classic natural scientific experiment to find out self-awareness is the mirror self-recognition test. So you paint somebody else something in the face, and if they recognize themselves in the mirror, they must have a picture of self, because they say, okay, this is me, it's not some alien person, and I grab my nose and touch it. With a number of animals, that works very well, even also with little birds, with crows, and these creatures see themselves in the mirror and recognize spots on them. It doesn't work with him. I tried it. You sit in front of the mirror, you paint his nose, and he gives a shit. Okay, you could ask yourself, is this because he doesn't recognize himself in the mirror? Then I ask you, he sees a dog. What does he think is that? He does react as if he sees himself, because if there was another dog, he would at least go and have a look. Who is that? I know also that he understands mirrors. I've tried that as well. We did a blind between us. He was sitting here, I was sitting here. And then we only could see us via the mirror. And in the mirror, I showed him that I did something and hid it somewhere. And then I said, try to find it. And then he came and immediately took it. So he didn't use the mirror to solve problems. He understands that the mirror is a reflection and not a vision in this direction on. And he sees himself. So I conclude he realizes that it's himself. But this is not scientifically accepted. But on the other hand, he can smell himself. And he realizes that this is himself. In these brain scan experiments, and also Mark Beckhoff for 5 years gathered urine of dogs and then let them smell that. And we found, like in the brain scans, that if a dog smells his own urine, then he has almost no brain activity. He says, that's me, I know that. If he smells a dog or a human that he knows well, then he smells, there's only little brain activity, because he says, yeah, this is this guy, I know that. And if this is an alien, a being that he doesn't know, then there's lots of brain activity. He starts analyzing. What is that being? He can, from the smell, you know, realize what is the gender of this being, what is the age, what is the hormonal status, what is the emotion, if they had a strong emotion that is in the smell, how long ago was it, all these things he can analyze. So he's sitting there and analyzing, and there's lots of activity. So that proves to me that he is self-aware, because he realizes this is my urine and this is not my urine. So this must be something that has to do with a picture of himself. But there's also a huge difference if he's on a lead or is not on a lead. So he's aware, I am a dog on a lead. I'm acting differently. It's not that he feels the lead, not that he walks until the lead pulls him back and so, oh, I can't move. But instead, he is on the lead and he acts differently, like in the underground. And there's one thing, we have made this rule that in the underground, he's not always, back when we came now, he's not on the lead, but there is police, and so you don't want to be off the lead all the time, so sometimes he has to be. And then we go out the underground, and the first thing he does is he stops and says, the lead must go off, otherwise I don't walk on. Because he just doesn't want to be in a lead. And this is not because his movement's restricted. I have a lead that is 10 meters long. He doesn't want to be on a lead. I am an autonomous dog, and I act myself off the lead. And this clearly proves to me that he is a self-aware being. Also, that when he's on a safety belt in a car, we use a safety belt in a car, we also have a specific dog avalanche peeps. And so for him, the companies are doing this nowadays. And if it's on a safety belt in a car, I once forgot it, and I had to open the door and said, come out, and he doesn't. I say, come out, and he doesn't. And I realized, oh, he's on a safety belt. So, yes, it makes a difference for him. He doesn't move until he's ripped. He's sitting there aware, I am on a safety belt, I can't get out. So that is for me very clear that this is something that defines his personality. So basically he's definitely a being with conscious decisions. He has a free will in the sense that we have. I don't want to get into details about determinism or whatever, but humans are considered in a practical sense to have free will. I'm talking to people in order to influence them and whatever, and count on their decision, feeding them rational information to decide. And yes, it's true that the abstract thinking of causality is not as good as I am, but he is better than I am in emotional intelligence, in understanding relationships and in interpreting them and acting correspondingly. He's also pacifying, like if there's an argument between two and he doesn't want a tension in the air, he might go in between and just stop it simply by sitting in front. Yeah? You know, there's one person sitting and the other, and they shout at each other, and he sits in front so that if you shout, you have to shout at him. And this is typically pacifying activity, because you don't want to shout at him, you want to shout at the person behind, and you can't do it because he's physically in the way. And so he has these kind of activities in order to pacify his buddies or his family, if you want. And he has his own values, and he acts accordingly to them. He has a number of values, and one of them, the highest possibly, is to keep our relationship. And this is a value system, and in that sense it's moral, because he has this value is higher than this in his view, and so he's acting correspondingly. And if there's a drive coming up that he would love to run over the road with another dog, then he's holding back because he doesn't want to be driven over by a car, or if there's something that is endangering our relationships, he would hold back so that our relationship isn't threatened. So in that sense, he's a full person, and it should be the case that non-human animals like him should be considered and accepted as full persons and have basic rights. And as a last sort of word, with him, one can see clearly also the difference between basic animal rights and animal liberation. Animal liberation means the social liberation, that these beings have as much freedom as they can have. Rights is a method of achieving that. But with him, that might not even be enough, the rights, you know, because if it's a right that he can walk over the zebra crossing and be respected is one thing, and that he isn't killed and he isn't hurt. But in the personal relationship, if you dominate him, if you manipulate him with conditioning, then he is not free. Freedom means that he's off the lead and that he can walk where he wants and do what he likes in our relationship in an equal manner. And that I would consider animal liberation. And so for him, for me, he and our relationship is sort of the example of that works, and that is my, at least my intention with my